Hello everyone and welcome back to the NPC Dungeon. As promised, I have a short little story about a mystery that I recently ran. I was planning on doing one that I ran a while ago, but my memory was a little fuzzy on that one, so I decided to settle on a more recent one. But I think it demonstrates what a mystery is and how it works in D&D pretty well. So, what happened? We begin in the underground city of Volgaldir, a fictional location that I rolebuilt for this campaign. The story takes place in the very beginning of this campaign. My players were all independently living their own lives and simultaneously preparing for a job they had all independently been hired for. They were all called to meet a dwarf going by the alias Copper in an old and abandoned industrial park called the Conquest Industrial Park in this city. The job? To rob a train. Yes, there are trains in this world. If you want to hear more about this world and learn about why I made this the way I did and how I intend for this to kind of lead into the way I intend to run this new campaign, my new style for this campaign, let me know in the comments and I'll devote a whole episode to that if you want. I'll be more than happy to talk about that. One of my players' characters, a translucent blue-green ooze named Gum, was traveling through a part of town called Svirfneblin Town, where, as you might have guessed, many deep gnomes lived. One in particular, an old alchemist named Rubblecounter, which was his last name, his only consistent name. He was quite fond of scratching out his name written on his sign for his potion shop and writing a new one over it, told Gum of strange bugs he'd heard about and asked for samples if Gum ever found one. This player was suspicious. This potion vendor wasn't necessarily known for reliability, but he was entertaining, so Gum agreed to keep an eye out. Another one of my players, Cleo, had just arrived in the city, and after talking to an old contact, began making her way to the park. Just as V, not Vyamus this time, that was a character from a previous campaign. If you want to hear more about those stories, feel free to check out my Campaign 2 playlist, and we'll talk about this character, and others as well. This V, instead, was a female dark elf who had received this job from a different source, a kind of thieves guild she was a part of. This source also warned her that the machines in that park have been known to fire randomly, and there have been recent disappearances from their organization, one of which was a high elf with golden skin, bronze hair, and amber eyes, so she should be careful. They all convened in an alley on the way, but they were promptly attacked by a band of flat straw hat and pinstripe suit wearing assailants there to send a message to Cleo. My players barely got out, with two making death saves, but that's first combat for you. Anyway, Copper was to give them details about this job upon their arrival, but upon their arrival they saw no such dwarf. Tall cranes loomed overhead, mountains of rubble and shipping containers dotted the place as well, next to a giant drill and myriad warehouses and tool sheds. But upon their arrival, as I said, there was no such sign of Copper, so the mystery was on. Gum looked down to notice a light crossbow covered in some viscous-looking and acidic-smelling liquid, while Cleo looked up and found an arrow embedded in a slightly ajar door attached to a small shed next to a tall crane. While Gum was examining the crossbow, Cleo looked inside the small room, finding a disheveled bedroll and packed up rations and food supplies alongside a fizzled-out fireplace with shreds of still-burning papers inside and around it. From the untarnished scraps, Cleo was able to make out that whoever was staying here was investigating the behavior of some insects, and that the sound of the drill was able to draw them and perhaps control them. Gum didn't want to be hasty, but all this talk of insects was starting to sound pretty familiar, and V thought back to what she'd been told about the equipment randomly firing off. Could that be the drill? The drill that whoever was living here was using to control these insects? She decided to do some looking around of her own, just not for clues. No, she wanted to know if she could find anything of value here. Just outside the shed where she was looking, there were 5 holes punched into the ground, dug out like tunnels of some kind of burrowing animal. Just outside of them was in fact a very nice pair of jewel-encrusted and gold-lined shoes. She grabbed them, but as she did, her eyes landed on a nearby warehouse. It was decrepit with haphazard brickwork and various stones jutting out of the walls. The large bay door at the end was pulled down over the main entrance and bowed out and punched at the top, making it hard if not impossible to move, even if she used all of her strength. So she set her sights on a window high up on one of the walls. She climbed up on the jagged, outward jutting bricks, making for very nice handholds, and peered inside. It was just one massive room, but this room was in disrepair if there ever was one. Furniture was toppled over, parts of the panels in the ceiling and walls were caved in, and the walls themselves were bowed in various places, but that wasn't all. Eggs littered the place, and in the middle of it all were 5 holes, just like the ones she'd seen outside. She moved to investigate the tunnels, walking bravely out into the open, but after a few steps she realized that she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by countless larvae lying still and appearing to be in some sort of hibernating state. The bugs shifted, and she knew she had to run. She threw all caution to the wind and rushed to the door. In a burst of strength, she grabbed at the top of the corner that was bowed in before, pulled it down just far enough for her to fit through, struggled out, and bolted back to the rest of the group. Meanwhile, Gum decided to channel an impeccable sense of smell and sniff for signatures. There was a very strong one on the crossbow, but there was also a very faint one elsewhere that was hard to pin down. This one was different, but before they could turn to investigate, V came rushing back, talking about some bugs she saw in the warehouse. Gum followed behind to investigate, but Cleo picked up on a sound and turned her head to investigate behind her, and she wasn't at all prepared for what she saw. Someone she recognized, a sister of sorts, dashing into one of the shipping containers. She was a high elf with golden skin skin, bronze hair, and amber eyes. Rage poured into Cleo's veins as she blindly turned to the container, leaving the group for now. Cleo might have walked away, but Gum was doing anything but. Gum had already scaled the wall and slithered down into the room. As Gum was a hunter, the first instinct was to set up a trap at the tunnels in the center, but the littlest sound alerted the droves of larvae, and they sprang up into action. Gum tried to disguise as a puddle, but that didn't work either. The cacophonous buzzing from all these bugs stirring to wakefulness reached V's ears on the outside, muffled by the dilapidated walls. She began throwing ball bearings and oil on the ground in front of the door in case the bugs escaped, but Gum, still on the inside, had a different plan in mind. The ooze slid back up the wall, climbing back up to the window as the bugs stopped, too young to have quite grown their wings yet. They followed the slime with their eyes and threw themselves at the wall, beginning to climb as Gum reached the window. Recognition reached their eyes as they saw that their slimy assailant was trying to escape. Gum removed the huge stone great club concealed in their gelatinous body and slammed it into the wall one time, twice, a third time, until the walls collapsed and the building came down on the bugs. V and Gum found one in the wreckage, buried under a fallen support beam. V knelt down to put it out of its misery, but it spat a globule of strange viscous liquid, the same type they found on the crossbow they entered. Someone had been attacked by these creatures before, but why? They gathered up the dead thing to bring back to Rubble Counter before realizing that Cleo was nowhere to be seen. No, she was arguing with the shipping container. When they went to help, Gum squeezed under the door and into the container only to find the same golden-skinned, bronze-haired high elf with amber eyes that Cleo had told them about. Shortly after Gum got in, V was able to pick the lock to the doors behind them and get inside. This individual matched the description that she was given earlier on, but she was smarter than I first thought. She reached for a ridge on the inside of the container and pulled, opening up the back and running out. V and Cleo gave chase with Gum trailing behind. Oozes aren't that fast. The high elf disappeared around a corner, but V had it planned out. She turned, separating from the group, and cut her off. Surrounded, she had no other choice but to talk. She'd apparently been told to come here and investigate the behavior of these strange bugs by an unknown mastermind who had some leverage over her. She had found that the sounds of the drill could control them, and was testing this out when a dwarf strolled in wearing some very nice shoes, by the way. She didn't mean to hurt them, but she saw the bugs carry the dwarf into a pile of rubble underneath one of the drills. The rest of her story and her history with Cleo could wait. They had a dwarf to save. They followed her directions to the pile of rubble, but upon closer inspection, it looked more like a haphazard dome intentionally constructed with that same paste-like liquid they saw on the crossbow, holding parts of it together. It was filled with these bugs, and a barefoot dwarf in the very back bound in webs. They'd found him, but that's where we're leaving off the story. I'll be honest, I did shave off some parts for the sake of brevity. They actually returned to Rubble Counter and talked to their newest recruit in an outdoor diner before having a run-in with a group of other oozes, and then finally returning back to find copper. But I thought plotting the story this way made it a little more digestible. I hope it was also as informative as it was hopefully entertaining, and as always, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out this week's other video, it's all about mysteries, and come back next week where I'll talk about the Session 0 on Friday, which is typically when I release my DM Advice videos, and where I'll tell the first story in a series that I've been meaning to tell for a while now on Saturday, which is typically when I release my DD story videos. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, let's learn something.